let's get started. Welcome, everybody, and good morning, afternoon, or evening from wherever you are joining us in the world today. Thank you for being part of this webinar to learn more about the Mercy Corp Ventures Crypto for Good Fund, which is supporting projects built on XRPL for startups based in or serving emerging markets. I'm Jonathan Perri. I'm the Senior Manager of Global Social Impact at Ripple, and thrilled to be here today with XRPL Commons and Mercy Corp Ventures. This webinar will cover everything you need to know about the Crypto for Good Fund, its goals, use cases, past project winners, and practical tips for submitting a successful application. With the help of XRPL Commons, we'll dive into how the XRPL is uniquely positioned to power the type of impactful solutions supported by the Crypto for Good Fund, and Mercy Corp Ventures will give a detailed overview of the fund itself and the work that they do. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature, and we will address them either directly in the chat or at the end of the call if there's time. And please keep those questions specific to the Crypto for Good Fund. So introducing our speakers, again, I'm Jonathan Perri, and I'm the Global Social Impact Manager at Ripple. I help to manage a number of our social impact programs at Ripple as part of our Ripple Impact team, including our partnership with Mercy Corp Ventures. And I'm joined today by two incredible partners from XRPL Commons and Mercy Corp Ventures, who share the goal of providing resources and training to projects from this fund and fostering scalable XRPL blockchain projects that can advance financial resilience and inclusion. We have Odelia Torteman, Director of Corporate Adoption at XRPL Commons, who leads efforts to empower organizations through strategic partnerships and customize XRPL use cases. And we have Timothy Asiimwe, Head of Crypto Venture Lab at Mercy Corp Ventures, who oversees high-impact pilots from across Africa, Latin America, and South Asia, leveraging blockchain to solve real-world challenges. So Timothy and Odelia will handle most of the presenting and talking today, thankfully. But before I hand things over, I want to give you just a high-level overview of Ripple and our partnership with Mercy Corp Ventures. So next slide, please. So Ripple's vision is the Internet of Value, a global financial system where money moves as seamlessly as information does today, unlocking financial opportunities for billions of people globally. And blockchain and digital assets are key to achieving this vision. Next slide. So what is it that Ripple actually does? Well, we're a leading provider of digital asset infrastructure for financial institutions, providing secure, compliant digital asset infrastructure that enables institutions to tokenize, store, exchange, and move value. And Ripple's solutions are built on the XRPL ledger, secure, scalable, and proven blockchain. Our offerings include payments and custody solutions, and we're excited about soon to launch RLUSD, USD pegged stablecoin. Next slide, please. And since 2020, Ripple has partnered with Mercy Corp Ventures through our Ripple Impact Initiative to support emerging market entrepreneurs and SMEs through investments and funding of blockchain and fintech pilots. We have a shared goal of closing the funding gap for emerging market founders and demonstrating how blockchain can go beyond the hype that's existed for years and really demonstrate how it can deliver real-world impact, particularly for unbanked and underbanked populations in emerging markets. So the Crypto for Good Fund, which we'll be focusing on today, is a standout initiative sort of born from this partnership that showcases incredible companies and pilots from across various chains. But with the XRPL speed and ultra-low fees and its developer-friendly environment, we're really excited to see more XRPL-based applications in this year's fund. So again, thank you all for joining us to learn about this opportunity. So I hope this session leaves you inspired and equipped to submit your own impactful project. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Odelia to tell you about XRPL Commons and some of the key features of the XRPL blockchain.
Thank you, Jonathan, and hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Very glad to be with you today. So a few sentences about what is XRPL Commons. It is basically an open source association based out of Paris with the mission to basically create the optimal conditions for success for the few individuals and entities that comprise the XRPL ecosystem, which are the entrepreneurs, the developers, the startups, and the corporates, and to basically do everything we can in order to support this ecosystem to be a thriving one. So we are constantly focusing on developing new, innovative, impactful use cases that are targeting to solve real-world use cases and to assist both developers as well as businesses to actually understand, learn more, what can blockchain technology do and be relevant for their businesses, obviously very much focusing upon the XRPL and the different capabilities that it has. Next slide, please. Now, the way that we operate in order to achieve this mission is basically focusing on our 4 developed pillars. First is the learn. Basically, our goal, what we're focusing on, is to democratize the education and the knowledge across blockchain. And we're doing it by working both with professors as well as with universities and with all kinds of educational programs. So from one side, we have academic partnerships with different types of universities around the world, from the UC Berkeley to the Sorbonne, whereby we have developed and designed courses, like I said, both for the professors as well as for the students, covering both the technical elements as well as the business elements and the operational aspects of the blockchain. We're doing all kinds of learning resources for the wider community via our Oasis platform, which is basically an educational playground for professors, making sure that we have all kinds of different models accessible for different types of individuals that would like to basically learn and educate themselves much more. And we have all kinds of research development program, whereby we collaborate with different types of universities across different types of PhD program in order to support existing R&D endeavors across the blockchain network. Second pillar that we have is the build, which is basically focusing on the startups and on the developers, whereby from one side, we're working with developers, offering different types of courses for developers in different types of levels of maturities from one side. From the other side, we have our residency program, which is XRPL Commons Startup Program. It's an in-house 3 months incubation program, which in every cohort focuses on different theme, whereby we introduce and provide access to the different residents to a wide spectrum of mentors and global experts, which covers everything that basically a startup entrepreneur needs to learn and know in order to develop a winning XRPL-based venture. So we're currently actually next week going to conclude the current cohort, which is focusing on DeFi. Next one is going to be focusing on gaming, and the next one is going to be focusing on blockchain and AI. So do feel free to reach out and to tab into our website to learn a bit more about this program. Under the build side, we also actually run our own infrastructure and support the existing XRPL infrastructure by helping supporting the ecosystem of nodes. So we're also very active from an infra perspective. The third pillar, the adopt one, is focusing on our work with corporates. So basically, the goal is to constantly develop real-world use cases in line with the changing market needs and in line with what corporate and institutional players needs from one side. And from the other side, also making sure that we're constantly enhancing the ledger functionality. And that means working with different types of players and with solutions that can be complementary elements to what we currently have on the ledger, and make sure that we're constantly updating with the goal to actually making the XRPL the go-to solution for different types of enterprise and corporate-based different types of projects. And fourthly is basically the engage, which is the arm whereby we are focusing on enhancing the connection between the XRPL and the community. So we have all kinds of activities that we're leading, from global meetups that we're hosting all around the world, to our community magazine, which we're launching every quarter, to town halls, whereby we are constantly updating the communities and opening our ear to be learning the feedbacks and the inputs from the community in order to constantly improve. The next town hall is next week, and we kindly really encourage all of you to be joining us. And we also very much participate across all kinds of industry events, roundtable sessions, and so on and so forth. So now, after you learned a little bit who commons are, basically, I want to take a few minutes to share a bit what is basically the XRPL ledger. So if we can please move to the next slide. So the XRPL is basically an open source, decentralized layer 1 public blockchain led by a community of both developers as well as businesses that are all looking to solve the challenges that they're currently facing and create additional value. And the ledger was designed from the inception basically to revolutionize the international money transfer with the XRP token as a bridge currency. And this basically translates into a great deal of utility in terms of offering lightning fast speed of transaction, modern architecture, and a lot of pre-built, predefined functionalities, which offers a very rich arsenal of tools to use. Now, I think that in context of the webinar that we're currently hosting, one of the important things to remember is that the XRPL was basically built from day one to serve the financial service industry. So hence, a lot of the functionalities that it offers are designed to be supporting a lot of the operations, services, and products that financial services, both finance and capital markets, are currently dealing with, which makes it an extremely valuable tool for everything that falls under FSI, right? So that basically means we have transactions which are fast, which are secured, which are incredibly cheap, right? Which are very efficient and extremely secured. And as I mentioned, XRPL was basically proven reliable for over a decade with basically zero error in terms of functioning, which is quite remarkable. We have a very low requirement from a computational power perspective. And like I said, it's public and decentralized, utilizing a very unique consensus mechanism of the proof of association, which basically enables you the ability to interact with nodes that have already been vetted, which provides a lot of reliability and a very important element when trying to design FSI-based use cases. If we can please move to the next slide. Now, some of the key building blocks which makes the XRPL such an amazing tool, as I mentioned, first and foremost is the fact that we have a native decentralized exchange, which basically enables to buy and sell and conduct all kinds of capital markets activities and orders. And the important thing to say, as I mentioned, is that these functionalities was pre-built in the protocol from day one. So important to remember that other protocols are doing and enabling these functionalities by using smart contracts and by using all kinds of bridges and additional functionalities, which has its own challenges. But within the XRPL, these are basically pre-configured and pre-designed. We have basically the ability to issue the asset, which refers to everything around tokenization, right, to represent various types of assets. Today, of course, one of the key elements is around real assets tokenization, but we also have non-real world assets tokenization, and the entire play of representing, dealing, trading with all kinds of different types of asset classes. It's basically a pre-configured features of the XRPL. We have the AMM, which in the end of the day provides a lot of liquidity for the ledger, which is of course something that different types of vendors and solution needs, requires, and gain a lot from having. So this strong liquidity is being gained with having many banks, institutions, companies, and of course Ripple itself, which are trading on top of the XRPL. We have the token assets control, which is something that we call the trust line between accounts, which is again a very interesting functionality that enables you to receive tokens only from accounts that you have already vetted and approved. Again, a very important function for financial services. And we have different types of other elements which falls under the advanced payments in elements such as the escrow accounts and the checking account, which again offers a lot of flexibility when dealing with financial service and capital markets operations. So if we can please move to the next slide, is basically these features together with the fact that the whole architecture is extremely user-friendly, right? With the one endpoint approach, what we call one API to rule them all, which basically makes it very easy and user-friendly to integrate to this entire basket of different types of functionalities and pre-configured, predefined features, which are very easy to use and to operate with, and makes it, like I said, extremely on a minimal code required and extremely friendly. And I think that, again, within the context of this webinar, all these key features are what makes the XRPL an extremely relevant ledger, specifically when one is trying to design decentralized finance-based use cases for developing markets and to support financial inclusion, because many of these markets, as we know, are facing a lot of the challenges that also developed countries are facing, but in a larger scale from once. And from the other side, can also benefit quite greatly from the flexibility and functionality that the ledger, enhanced by different types of DeFi-based use cases, can offer. So I hope this provides you a short glimpse into the XRPL world. Of course, there's a lot more. This is why ours, together with Ripple and with Mercy Corp Ventures, are here to basically take you through your journey on the XRPL ledger and to make sure that together we can design quite remarkable and innovative use cases. So let me hand over to Timothy to share a bit of information about Mercy Corp Ventures. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Odelia. So quickly about Mercy Corp Ventures. We are the impact investing arm of Mercy Corp, which is a global nonprofit operating in more than 40 countries across the world. And Mercy Corp Ventures was founded in 2015, and our thesis is centered around climate adaptation and resilience solutions. Early stage startups that have gone on to raise over $500 million. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to quickly walk you through the Crypto for Good Fund, tell you a little more about the fund and provide an overview of the benefits, as well as provide a few tips on how you can craft your application. Next slide, please. So as John mentioned, the goal of a Crypto for Good Fund is really to close what we call the hype gap in Web3. So, everyone sort of understands the potential of blockchains, but we still haven't seen real world applications that are sort of fulfilling this potential. And so our goal with the Crypto for Good Fund is to identify and support innovative use cases with a focus on financially underserved and climate vulnerable populations in emerging markets. And this is the fourth iteration of the Crypto for Good Fund. So to date, we've funded over 15 pilots, and we just launched the fourth call for applications, and the deadline for that will be on the 20th of December. So moving on to the next slide. You might be wondering, okay, so what's the benefit for being a part of this? The first benefit is that we provide up to $100,000 in equity-free financing. So this is non-dilutive capital. And then if you run a pilot with us, you'll have the benefit of working closely with team members from Mercy Corp Ventures, as well as get exposure to our network of investors and entrepreneurs. And then also one of the benefits of running a pilot with us is the tailored advisory that we offer with regards to impact measurement and management. So like I mentioned, we've run more than 15 pilots, and we have an in-house team that has vast experience when it comes to designing impact frameworks that align with global standards. And then lastly, one benefit that many startups find beneficial is the boost in marketing for their startups. So as part of running a pilot with us, we do a bit of marketing around the launch announcement, as well as publicizing the results that come out of the pilot. Next slide, please. Right. So as John mentioned, the goal for the Crypto for Good Fund is, we're really focused on underserved users in emerging markets. And just to give you a sense of some of the target populations that we've worked with in the past, these include people like smallholder farmers, refugees and migrants, unemployed youth and informal workers, as well as women and micro entrepreneurs. Like I mentioned, the thesis of Mercy Corp Ventures is really centered around increasing the financial resilience and the climate resilience of underserved people in emerging markets. And so when we're looking at applications for the Crypto for Good Fund, we take a keen interest in solutions that are addressing problems that are faced by these target populations. And then moving to the next slide, to give you a sense of the kind of partners we work with. So typically we work with impact-driven entrepreneurs and tech-focused startups. And we have a slight bias towards locally led teams, so teams that have an on-ground presence and are able to execute in the geography where the pilot is running. And at the same time, this is a crypto for good fund, and so we're looking to fund solutions that in the blockchain or Web3 in some way. And then obviously we're also looking for solutions that fit within our thesis, which is centered around improving the financial and climate resilience of people in emerging markets. Moving on to the next slide, well, you might also be wondering, well, what kind of solutions are we interested in? I'll preface this by saying that, the Crypto for Good Fund is open to solutions across a wide spectrum. But there are a few areas where we take a keen interest, and I just want to quickly highlight some of those. So one is around what we call broader access. And here we're looking at solutions that can onboard more people to Web3. Whether it's in different markets, whether it's targeting people on specific form factors, we're always keen to unlock new ways for people to access Web3 solutions. The second piece is around what we call programmable money. And this is really around using smart contracts to create efficiencies and make processes smoother and operate in a more efficient way. And then the third piece is around, what we call locally adapted solutions. And this is really around, adapting solutions that have worked in other markets and sort of tailoring them to the local contexts in emerging markets. And then we're also keen in solutions that are centered around humanitarian aid delivery. Across the world, billions of dollars are moved around, to support humanitarian causes, but we find that, these money movements are still inefficient. And so we're always keen to identify blockchain use cases that can make these more efficient. And then the third piece is really around what we call climate innovation. And on this slide, you can see a list of a few of the pilots that we've launched to date. And I'll just highlight a few of these. We launched a pilot to tokenize government bonds in Cameroon, and I'll briefly touch on that later. And then we also run a pilot around providing better access to water for people in India by tapping into the ability of the blockchain to better incentivize and coordinate people. Moving on to the next slide. Right. So next, I want to talk about the selection criteria for the Crypto for Good Fund. So we have 5 main buckets here. One is around thesis alignment, and this is really we're trying to understand how does the solution align with our resilient future thesis, which has a focus on financial inclusion and climate resilience. And then the second piece is around what we call innovativeness. And here we're really looking to fund first-of-a-kind solutions. So, in your proposal, you really need to highlight what is new, what is innovative, what is transformative about whatever you're building. And also highlight, what's the potential for this solution to scale more broadly. And then the third piece is around traction. So this will vary depending on the stage where you're at. If you're a team that, has been around for some time and you have a user base, then we'll be keen to understand, how many users do you have? What kind of volumes are you moving? That kind of thing. But if you are a really early stage startup, then we'll be keen to understand, what has the team done before? And, what are your backgrounds and what have you achieved in your past? And then the fourth piece is around what we call sustainability. As much as this is equity-free financing, we're looking to fund solutions that are sustainable. That means solutions that have viable business models. And so this is probably an area, that you should spend a bit of time to think about as you craft your application. Sometimes, we've worked with nonprofits, but even for nonprofits, we're keen to understand how will this solution be carried forward at the end of the pilot. And then the last piece is around impact. Like I mentioned, we're impact investors. And so this is always front and center in everything that we do. And so here we're basically keen to understand who is this pilot serving? If this solution is successful, how many people can be reached by such a solution? And then I would like to quickly touch on a few application tips. Couple of things that you might want to avoid as you craft your application. One of these is avoid the use of buzzwords. Just try and use clear, concise language as you draft your application. And then another area that we see teams not do a very good job around is the pilot hypothesis. So like I mentioned, we're really keen to build the evidence base for Web3 in emerging markets. And so for each pilot that we fund, we want to understand what is the hypothesis? What do you hope to learn? What do you hope to prove from the pilot? And then lastly, we'll ask you to submit a few links. We'll ask you to submit a budget, a deck, and a few other things. And so just make sure that whichever links you submit, make sure that these links are publicly viewable so that, to save on the back and forth when it comes to reviewing your application. And then moving on to the fund process, I'd like to just give you a quick idea of the timeline that you can expect, when you hit the submit button. So like I mentioned, the deadline is the 20th of December, but we are reviewing applications on a rolling basis. And you can basically expect to hear back from us before the end of January, telling you whether you're moving forward or not in the process. And if you move forward in the process and we eventually run a pilot with you, then you can expect that this will kick off sometime around April or May next year. And typically our pilots run for about 6 months. So ideally before end of December 2025, the pilot should be wrapping up. Yeah, so with that, next slide, please. With that, I would strongly encourage you, to apply for the Crypto for Good Fund. If you feel that this is a fit with what you're building, and we estimate that it should take you about 2 to 4 hours to draft your application, and all applications have to be completed in English language. And like I mentioned, we review applications on a rolling basis. On this slide, we have a few links. One is to the term sheet, which provides a bit more in-depth information about, eligibility as well as the application process and pilot timelines. And I would invite you to check out this link. I believe we will share this deck at the end of this presentation, and you should check out this link as well as visit our FAQs there might be questions in there that we haven't touched in this presentation. And so now, before we open it up for Q&A, I would like to just highlight a few example use cases of pilots that we've funded in the past, just to give you a sense of the kind of projects and proposals that we're looking for. Next slide, please. So the first example is a pilot that we run in Kenya with Cinch. And with this pilot, we're basically looking, the overall hypothesis was to use DeFi to provide faster loan delivery and reduce the administrative overhead that comes with loan disbursement. I guess just to provide a bit of context here, smallholders and casual laborers in Kenya and in many emerging markets often have limited access to credit. And so many times their employers actually offer them short-term loans in the form of salary advances. But the process of handling this disbursement tends to be administratively intense, which creates bottlenecks when it comes to scaling. And so the basic hypothesis here was, can we use DeFi? Can we use a blockchain-based solution to make this process more effective and smoother. So this is a pilot that we launched in 2021, and the pilot came to an end, and I will invite you to check out our blog if you're curious to learn more about the results of that pilot. Another example I'd like to quickly highlight is a pilot that we launched in Cameroon with a startup called Ijara. And I guess a bit of context here, in many emerging markets, many African markets, government bonds are basically the best investment for anyone as if you're looking for a high yield, low risk savings product. But for many of these bonds, there's a minimum investment amount which ranges about $1,500. And so this basically puts this product out of reach for many low-income users. And so the key hypothesis here that Ijera had was, by bringing these bonds on chain, and that allows you to fractionalize them, and that allows you to bring down the minimum investment amount from as high as 1,500 to as little as $1.5. And so this is a pilot that we launched with Ijera about 2 years ago, and it recently came to a conclusion with very interesting results. So the pilot was able to scale to over 10,000 users. And the results are really impressive. Again, if you're curious to learn more about this, I'll invite you to visit our blog. And with that, we'll open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Timothy. There's a few questions in the Q&A module here. Let me pull one specific for you that you'll be best to answer, and then I think there's a couple that I think Odelia and XRPL comments would be great for. But there's one from Eric asking, are countries in East Asia like Japan, Korea, or China eligible for the fund?
Right, that's a good question. Yeah, so I don't have the full list of countries with me, but I'll invite you to look at the term sheet, which includes the full list of countries. But generally speaking, I guess, I'll also answer a separate question. One question we get a lot is, does it matter where the team is best and where the pilot is to be run? So two things: your team can be best anywhere in the world, but the pilot should be running in emerging markets. And for the full list of countries, I'll invite you to visit our term sheet. Within Asia, I know that typically we work with countries in South Asia. So that includes, India, Nepal, and countries in that region. I wouldn't be too sure about Japan and Korea, but I'll post the link. Actually, the link is in the deck, and I'll just invite you to check that just to double check if these countries are included in there. And also just to note, if the team is best in these countries, it's fine, but the solution should be launched in one of the eligible countries. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
It does. I think that was great. And Odelia, could you dive in a little bit more on some of Timothy highlighted a few of the specific pilots that have been sponsored and made it through the Crypto for Good fund, both with DeFi savings as well as tokenization of real world assets. Any other use cases that you would want to highlight for builders thinking about submitting?
Sure. This is a great question because there are so many of them, right? I think when one wants to explore use cases, first thing is obviously to look at the different challenges that we have, right? So when we look at access to finance in developing markets, one thing is obviously everything that has to do with the actual operational aspect of things. How accessible are financial services and products to the different consumers? So I think that all the use cases that are focusing on those aspects of making financial services and product more accessible, right? So from payments to using of salaries to credit that was mentioned here, right? Each one of those is a huge ocean of use cases that can be explored. So from credit, it can be the ability to provide credit, the ability to provide almost credit scoring based on additional data points, the ability to use different types of collateral for credit, right? In terms of using some of the decentralized features. From the other side is the whole play around tokenization of new assets. And I think that a lot of the things that XRPL is quite perfectly designed for is this element. So if you think about how can you tokenize assets that are then being used for different types of financial collateral? Timothy briefly mentioned on everything that has to do with salaries, right? But this entire play of tokenizing and using existing assets or currently non-existing assets to create more liquidity, to enable everyday operation from one, and from the other side, ability to save. Because at the end of the day, what really provides financial inclusion and what really empowers those communities and those individuals is the ability to equip them with tools that will enable them, A, to use funds, and B, also to save money, right? Because these are the two elements that they are lacking the most. So I would say these are just a few examples that are already very much relevant. And again, we can always go a level higher with everything that has to do with tokenization of bonds, right? And here, if we speak or if we work together with partners, which can either be governmental or financial institutions or MSCs, base of the pyramids institutions, microfinance institutions within those countries, one of the key targets that they're looking for are additional financial tools to be able to bank the unbanked or to be able to provide services for those communities. And one of the key challenges that they're facing is that in essence, those communities are not, their value is not high enough to be worth the efforts that financial institutions needs to put into play in order to serve them. So every solution that might solve those challenges, every solution that might be able to lower down the cost, to lower down the operational burden, to lower down existing practices might be very relevant here.
Absolutely, big plus one to that. I think the tokenization pilot is a great one for for anyone considering applying to read through. And all of the pilots and the case studies that are done by Mercy Corp Ventures from each of these are very detailed. So following the call, all attendees will get this presentation and the links to each of those that Timothy had shown before. And you can dive deep into what those pilots look like, the results, the tech behind them, the chains they used. And again, I know there's a question in here that the fund is multi-chain, so it's not only projects built on XRPL. We're here today highlighting some of the unique capabilities of the XRPL for this use case, but it is a multi-chain fund. And let's try to answer one more question. I think there's a good one here around the stage of development that Timothy could answer, and it's what stage of development should a product be in, and is it okay if the startup has built the product but hasn't yet deployed it on XRPL?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of stage of development, we're really agnostic about that. We've funded late stage startups. We've also done pilots with really early stage startups. And so, there's no requirement in terms of the stage, but I guess what I would say is one of our selection criteria is around traction. And so if you are an early stage product, the way to sort of communicate to us your traction, there's several ways to do that. One is what you've built before. Two is, if you have a prototype or if you have a few users, we're keen to understand, what's the feedback coming out of that user group. Yeah, but I would say to answer your question, there's no restriction in terms of stage. It's okay if you're pre-product, but I guess the key thing to communicate is what are you looking to test with this pilot? What do you hope to learn with the pilot? What's the main hypothesis? And obviously, we're keen to find solutions that are addressing our target populations, which is basically underserved people in emerging markets. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
I think it absolutely does. Yeah, that's great. And all right, I think we've got time for one more quick one. I know that just a few more came in, and we will go through these and in the follow-up attempt to answer any of them that we don't get to here. And let's see. So I think the MVP question was fairly answered just now, but can we submit an idea backed by actual brick and mortar products in the market that we want to put on blockchain? I'd assume so. That sounds like kind of a tokenization use case.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. That sounds like a tokenization use case, and would basically be keen to understand how you're leveraging the blockchain to make these come to life. Like I mentioned, we're funding Web3 based solutions, and so if you figured out a way to sort of tokenize this, then I guess we'll be keen to understand how are you doing this, which user groups are you going after, and which markets are you going after, how innovative is this? I guess those are a few of the questions that would be keen to understand. But to answer your question directly, yes, you can submit an idea backed by brick and mortar products.
Great. And lastly, before we wrap up, I did just want to turn it over to Odelia and XRPL Commons. Is there anything you want to leave us with about Commons, about the XRPL, any upcoming events or resources that all of our attendees should check out?
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan. So first of all, as I briefly mentioned, what we currently provided you is a very high-level description of the XRPL. It's a quite rich protocol with a lot of functionalities, and our focus at Commons, as I mentioned, is really to walk you through your journey with XRPL, both from introducing you with the capabilities, with the functionalities, with the business element, as well as equipping you and providing you with the best tools and supporting ecosystem to launch your product and your venture on the XRPL. So we support different types of stages. There's room for everyone. There's value proposition for all types of entrepreneurs and developers across different stages, and we would very much be happy to stay in touch. So do feel free to type into our website and to see all the different projects that I've mentioned. Two maybe that I would like to highlight, as I briefly mentioned, the residency program. The Aquarium program is our flagship startups program. It's basically an incubation, non-equity, I would say, incubation program, which provides you an in-house 3 months program at our HQ in Paris with access, like I said, to different types of experts and different types of business fields, technology fields, even legal fields that one needs to know and be aware of once developing your own XRPL-based venture. Currently, we're concluding the DeFi. The next one is on gaming. One of the, I think, hottest and very interesting topics that we currently have. How do you gamify experience? How do you take tokenization and in-game elements? I think this whole place, since we're speaking here about developing countries, play to earn, I think, is a great example of how one can utilize different types of gamified elements and then try to transport them and use them as actual assets that maybe one can redeem and can maybe then use as financial assets to do all kinds of other activities. So there's a whole spectrum of ventures and things to explore. I would strongly encourage you, like I said, to look at the residency program and to see whether it is relevant for you or not. Next week, we're hosting a town hall whereby we will introduce different updates with regards to the XRP Commons and a few others updates regarding the overall network and ecosystem of the XRPL. So we will also share a link maybe after this call to the different participants that attended here. And in general, as we said, we're here for you. We're here to walk you through and to basically reach our hand and support you through your journey with XRPL, whether you're representing an enterprise, a corporate, or a developer, or a startup in different stages. We're very much be happy to stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know there was a few unanswered questions. Almost all of those are going to be answered in the Mercy Core Ventures term sheet and the frequently asked question about the fund, which Timothy will send around to everybody. And it's very thorough. It covers really everything that you're going to need to know about this fund, the application process, and submitting your project. So thank you all again for joining us today and for your interest in the Mercy Core Ventures Crypto for Good Fund. The biggest reminder I'll leave you with is that again, the deadline is the 20th of December. So keep that in mind and get working once we send this follow-up over to you. We hope you found this session insightful and that you're feeling inspired to submit those innovative XRPL-based projects. and be sure to check your inbox for the next steps and those resources that we mentioned. And so once again, thank you, a big thank you to Odelia, to Timothy, to Mercy Corps Ventures, and XRPL Commons for sharing their expertise, to all of you for your time and engagement, and we cannot wait to see the projects that you'll submit. So stay tuned, and thank you all again.